Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast, is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Pro. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tip from Trestle, I'm talking with Sanjeev Shetty. As co-founder of HelloGard Robotics and V-Care Companion, Sanjeev is a thought leader in the aging services and hospitality industries, bringing 25 years of experience in technology, strategy, and innovation to HelloGard. Prior to his time at HelloGard, Sanjeev ran an integrated platform as a service company called DB Sync, where he was president and COO. Prior to that, Sanjeev spent 2 years at Connected Living as their chief strategy officer. He has consulted in the senior living space, working on aging in place healthcare solutions and strategic partnerships. He also spent his early years working at Time Warner and later Spectrum, running large technology, process, and revenue organizations. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science and an MBA in competitive strategy. His passion is robotics and generative artificial intelligence. Sanjeev, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
So around this time last year, we got to collaborate on a really cool webinar where we did this community of the future. And we talked about how robotics and AI and technologies could really enhance the everyday life of a resident. And I wanted to circle back with you because one of the things that 18 months ago, 24 months ago, everybody was talking robotics this, robots that. And so it's not something I've heard a ton of talk about, but I know it hasn't gone away. So I really wanted to kind of get from you a state of robotics in senior living and just talk a little bit about some of the work you've been doing since our webinar last year.
Absolutely. And that conversation we had last year definitely is still fresh in my mind. And even though it seems like not too long ago, it feels like a lot has happened since then in the industry. So in terms of robotics, I think the last couple of years, people just saw robotics as a shiny new thing and everyone got excited about it. And there wasn't a lot of thought put into the actual use cases of robots until more recently. And there wasn't a lot of budget put towards it. So what we're finding since we last spoke is prior to the time that we spoke, a lot of the focus was on dining and solving for specifically the dining use case. So things like busing and having the robots wait on residents. Primarily, it was F&B focused. And since then, I think people are looking at other areas such as cleaning. When I say cleaning, I mean scrubbing and vacuuming. We see a big trend towards adoption of robots in that space. There's clear indication in that space using our ROI calculators that a robot is much more efficient than a human. And we can show that through our ROI calculator. But also in other areas such as outdoor delivery, as well as reading robots at the front desk. And more recently with the launch of V-Care Companion, we're seeing a lot of interest in the healthcare use case as well, specifically helping nurses as well.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my big takeaway was everybody was talking about the 3-tiered serving robots, right? And when we did our presentation, there were so many other areas that we were able to identify and talk about how robots could not necessarily like completely replace people, but the idea was they were doing some of the less we're letting people do more of the high touch, right? Whereas the low touch tasks, like you said, like mopping and sweeping and those kinds of things, a robot can easily take those on and repurpose that human asset, which is so important. And so As you've seen some of these other use cases, how have you and the team there at HelloGard began to kind of shift what you're doing and how you're supporting the senior living market with some of these other areas?
I think it all begins with education, Aaron, and a big portion of what we do is educate our customers and really understand their challenges. Because I think without that, there really isn't a point in adopting robots. And then the third piece of it is ensuring that the client is really prepared and ready for it. And what I mean by that is, do they have the right infrastructure? Do they have the right support staff locally to help support the installation and post install? We do help with installation, but how about when something goes wrong? Do they have someone that is appropriately trained? Do they have the sponsorship at the highest level? So those are the types of things we want to make sure are in place before we go in and install any of our robots on site.
Yeah, I think that last piece there that about like the sponsorship, right? I've found when it comes to technology that you can have an individual either at the community level or maybe even like at the regional level in an operation that is really excited about it, that's gung ho, like let's make this happen. But if you don't have the buy-in at all the levels, it will just like any other technology, robotics will just blow up in your face and it becomes this thing we have to figure out how to use as opposed to this benefit to our operation.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you have to have all three pieces before adopting robotics because it's not like it's not like a computer. It's the cost is different. The cost to maintain it is different, and it also takes a certain level of technology expertise in house to be able to support it and maintain it internally.
Yep. As we were talking a little bit about like I mentioned like the high touch, right? Like how can we use the robotics to kind of help fill in the lower kind of mundane tasks? When we look at the labor market, there's a lot of opportunity and there's been some recovery in that recently. But as you look at the labor market and how you're working with operators, how has it impacted the way they're approaching you and HelloGuard with robotics? And what is the opportunity there when thinking about labor in the labor market?
I think there's different areas where the operators are feeling labor pain. One, we started out with dining, but I think it goes beyond that as you look at the operation. I think there's just custodial staff that are highly strained and there's not enough labor there. I think there's a labor shortage on the clinical side as well.
Mm,
So I think you need to look at the operation as a whole and figure out where the gaps are. And that's where they come to us to help us sort of fill those gaps. But the other point I want to mention is we kind of are looking at robots not just as robots replacing labor, which they're not. They're really there to supplement and fill in those gaps. But we also look at this term called cobotics, which is basically robots and humans working together to
yeah.
achieve higher efficiencies and more productivity. So a good example of that would be on the cleaning side. On average, human, for example, could clean 2,000 square feet an hour, but our cleaning robots can clean anywhere from 4 to 10,000 square feet an hour, depending on the layout or the environment. So you're getting a lot more efficiency, but then you also have to have humans maintain the robot in terms of replacing consumables or making sure that they're in good shape and tracking the data and ensuring that they're running as designed. So the human factor doesn't completely go away. It just gets reduced quite significantly with the introduction of robots in an environment.
Yeah, I people have always throughout history talked about the jobs of the future and like how we need to consider retraining and repurposing our people. And I think you just right there mentioned a really good example of actually being able to do that. Instead of having two or three housekeepers or floor techs doing the manual work, now you've got maybe a higher skilled floor technician, for example, who's making sure that the two or three floor units that you've provided a community are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're getting changed out, they're getting their maintenance, they're operating correctly. And so, while maybe you've got one or two of those versus three or four floor techs, you've got a higher skilled, a higher paid position. and it winds up being a win-win across the board.
That's exactly right. We kind of see robots and humans working side by side, and we are constantly providing data. We have a proactive command center powered with tools to provide the data needed to the local management to really see the results on a daily basis and help with compliance as well.
Yeah, all very critical. And so, as you talk about like the way that those partnerships and that relationship has to work, it's not just a, hey, here's your robot, call us if something breaks kind of relationship. I'd love for you to share a success story or two that you've experienced recently with a customer using your systems and how it's improved their operation.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Yeah, we've had a couple of success stories in senior living. I think last year, Leading Age, we had a really great story where we had a client in Michigan actually buy one of our cleaning robots. And right away, within a few weeks, they were able to see the success with that cleaning robot. And since then, we've sold quite a few more. But like I said, the data is very, very transparent. We share the data with the client. And once they see the data, they're able to see the ROI and the cleaning capabilities of these robots. Now, that's just the cleaning space. We've also had success on the food delivery side as well. We are looking at use cases outside of the building. We have a very unique outdoor robot that we call it the last mile robot. So for instance, we have a site that has cottages that are detached from the main community, and they're exploring the use of our robots for things like mail delivery and food delivery, where someone cannot get to those cottages. So they have gotten more sort of creative in the sense of finding use cases that may not be traditional. So we are seeing those use cases pop up as well.
Yeah, it makes me curious. Do you find like the example you shared of the senior living operator who bought some housekeeping robots and then they wound up buying more robots? Do you find that once they get a positive experience like that, that it doesn't just translate to more of those units, but then they're more willing to explore other areas of the operation where you can kind of show the data and show the opportunity? Because now you've kind of shown that there's some proof in the pudding.
Yeah, so our goal and mission really is to be that one-stop shop for workforce automation, Aaron. So we don't just stop at cleaning. Oftentimes, cleaning is where we start because it's a very simple, easy to show ROI. And then once we start cleaning, there's obviously the conversation about where else can we apply workforce automation, robotics, and AI to solve for another challenge that you have. And oftentimes, that may not be in F&B or in cleaning. It could be in other areas of the business, such as healthcare. And we are really proud to announce VCare Companion, which is our Gen AI product that's helping healthcare workers and clinical staff to get more efficient, to do a lot of their admin tasks on a daily basis. And that uses a large language model. So we're really, really pleased to see some of the results from our initial pilots to date.
Very cool. Yeah, I know that when we did our webinar, that was something that we had kind of talked a little about and we hinted at, but it was something you guys had in development. So it's exciting to hear that you've got it out there for operators to start using. So obviously, we're talking about all the benefits and the great ROI for all of this. Implementation of any technology comes with challenges of its own, right? And so what are some of the challenges that operators should be aware of as they go into implementing robotics or artificial intelligence in their senior living communities?
I think it starts with the sponsorship that I talked about, Aaron. I think you need a local tech sponsor or an operational executive who sponsors the program. I think once you got that sponsor, then it's about making sure that you check all the boxes, right? We call it the checklist, making sure you have the right infrastructure, whether it's Wi-Fi or cell coverage. I can't tell you how many times we go into a site just to find out that there's spots that don't have Wi-Fi or there's no Wi-Fi at all. So we have to use a cellular SIM card, right? And then it's basic things like, if you're looking at a scrubbing robot, you need plumbing in place. So it's just making sure that the checklist has been looked at, verified, and complete before we arrive. And then going forward is just making sure that someone is trained on site. So when we come on site, we typically like to train an individual and have that person be the point of contact. So those are really the three main ingredients, having a sponsor, an executive sponsor, making sure the checklist has been thoroughly vetted, and then having someone that's locally trained as well as that can just basically do some very simple troubleshooting tasks.
Yeah, that sounds like it's very kind of easy to execute items, but when you dive into the nuts and bolts of it, it's not nearly as simple as it sounds sometimes, especially when you think about something as complicated as robotics. So as we kind of wrap up our time together, CNG, I would love to kind of get you to put your futurist hat on, if you will, and kind of tell us what's it going to look like with robotics and AI in the coming 18 months, 2 years, 3 years for senior living operators, and what do you see coming in your area?
I think clearly, if you look at the statistics around labor, the labor shortage is not going away. If anything, it's going to get worse. So the only way to supplement a labor shortage is through technology. And I think if you look at robotics, we've not had our chat GPT moment yet, but it's coming faster than you would expect. And I think in the next 1 year, we're going to have that moment when people realize that there's room for robots and AI, and they have to get ready for it. On the AI side, I kind of look at this as very simply put the software and the hardware side. Robots are the hardware that do all of the hard work, the day-to-day routine stuff, and AI is the one that actually thinks for you and was able to make decisions for you and give you responses. It's almost like having an encoder and decoder, right? These large data sets that you're feeding. And in order to get ready for these, you need to, once again, staff up. I would recommend having a chief AI officer position. You have a chief
Wow.
information officer, but I think you need a chief AI officer. We call it the robotics czar on the HelloGard side, but I think pretty soon you're going to have someone that focuses on AI and robots. And then once you start with that, then you need to be educated on what those use cases are. And we're actually very close to introducing a whole wide variety of courses that you can take around how do I get started with AI? What do I need in place to adopt AI? How do I get ready for robots? And that's going to help communities get more educated on how to get into robotics and AI. And once you do that, then it's just a matter of finding the right fit and the right solution to apply to those challenges that you have. So, we help you along the way from start to finish. We're a full service robotics and AI company. So we help you get educated. We help you realize and adopt robots in the right settings. And then we also show you the ROI and then maintain these robots. So we hold your hands all along the way.
No, yeah, and that's why I wanted to do kind of a robotics podcast update. Like, where are we? I knew you were the person to reach out to. So, um, how can the listeners of the podcast here connect with you or HelloGard and just learn more about how they can start partnering with you guys to start making some of their robotics visions come to life?
I think the easiest way is to go to hellogard.com. That's HelloGard.com. And from there, it'll walk you through all of the products. You can also shoot an email to sales@hellogard.com. If you're interested in our Gen AI healthcare product, please visit vcarecompanion.ai and we can help you there as well.
Perfect. Well, Sanjeev, such a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to reconnect and kind of give everybody an update on kind of the way or the status of robotics in senior living. So I appreciate all your time today, and thanks for joining me on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. It's always a pleasure.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestle. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.